Hi, Jeff. Thanks for meeting with us today. I would like to talk about the power of dialogue in a spiritual context.
Fantastic. Well, I think dialogue plays a very important role. So dialogue is at one level an exchange of ideas, and there's different levels of dialogue that need to take place. So there's the kind of dialogue that one has with someone who has more experience than they do, right? And there's a learning value there. If you've encountered someone and you recognize that they have some inner spiritual attainment that you feel very drawn to, you can learn an enormous amount by speaking to that person and finding out interesting things about how they're relating to their experience that might be different than the way you tend to relate to yours. And so that's one level of dialogue that can be very valuable. The other thing that happens in dialogue of that sort is there's what I believe in traditional spiritual circles, it's called transmission. So the idea is that someone who has more access to higher perspectives transmits those in a way that's beyond the words spoken. Sometimes I think the words are just the vehicle that holds the attention, but the energetic transmission of that perspective is arguably the more important. Now, more recently, neuroscience has come up with this idea of mirror neurons, which I think is an interesting way to think about spiritual transmission. Because what they say is, if I'm seeing something that you're not seeing, and I describe it to you, and while I'm describing it, I'm looking at the thing I'm describing, there are neurons in your system that will start to orient themselves in accordance to mine. And so you'll start to see what I'm seeing through some kind of osmosis. And I think that's a very powerful way to think about what spiritual transmission might be. Whatever it is, the effect that many people will report is that when they speak with someone who has some degree of attainment, that they start to see something that they weren't seeing before. And it doesn't have to do with understanding the words, and it doesn't have to do with learning something. It has to do with being brought into a view. And ultimately, in terms of spiritual dialogue, the ultimate value, in my opinion, is the capacity to be brought into a higher view. If you learn something, if you gain information, that's wonderful, but it's really not that valuable. What's valuable is being brought into a higher view. And you want to be brought into a higher view over and over again until it becomes a natural home for you. So one way you do that is by speaking with people who have more experience than you do, and that you recognize as having more attainment. But another way is when serious, interested parties who may be more equivalent in their experience and attainment, but they come together with a passionate desire to evolve, we can ratchet each other up through the power of shared perspective and dialogue and meld into a kind of unity of vision that takes us higher than the individuals. So by coming together, whether that's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 12 or more, but we come together, and the intensity of our interaction and the dialogue that we have together and the purity of the interest that we have in a higher view will actually rise. It's like we're all floating in an ocean, and by engaging, the level of the ocean's going up and we're all going up with it. And so, to me, those are the two most profound ways in which dialogue has spiritual value. And I'm a big believer in spiritual dialogue.
Right. I know that one of the things I experienced, at Andrew Cohen retreats was, he would bring people together to do that, to
Yes.
have dialogue. And my experience was that people just simply needed to be given permission to talk about things more important than just the everyday
Yes.
mundane. And as soon as that cork was released, it was just amazing what we could do with each other.
Oh, it's completely amazing. The other aspect of dialogue that's very, very important is that we are social creatures. And what that means is our ability to hold truths is partially collective, it's partially shared. So the analogy I like to use is if you were outside, say, and you saw a an alien up in a tree, and you talked to the person next to you and said, "Oh my God, look at that," and they said, "I don't see anything." You just turn to the next person and go, "Look at that," and they said, "Oh, I don't see anything." And I always like to think about how many people would say they didn't see it before you'd stop saying you saw it,
Oh, right.
right? Then
Uh,
and then how many more people would say they didn't see it before you stopped seeing it yourself?
right.
Before you were conditioned by the collective. And that's why I think throughout history, spiritual gatherings have been so important, because we need to create a field of mutually reinforcing perception, because otherwise it's just us against the dominant paradigm. And
Right.
besides those rare few, Ramana Maharshi, Eckhart Tolle's, most people aren't going to hold that higher view in the face of a whole culture telling you it's wrong. Uh,
Right.
and so we need to come together to sort of bolster up the strength of our conviction.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of what the shaman used to always do, I would suppose, in bringing people.
Hmm.
Yeah. Fascinating. Thank you.